Hey everyone, welcome to today's edition of One Single Story. It is Monday, so we're in a brand new week and a brand new month, and we are in the book of Nahum, and I got to practice saying that because we just had this discussion before we started. They said it one way, and I said it is what you hear people, how you hear them pronunciate. So my dad, ever how he said the books of the Bible or people in the Bible is most likely the person I had the most influence on me.
Mm.
And he said Nahum.
I've never heard that.
Really? That's how he said it. And y'all said Nahum, so it caused us to ask Rabbi Google what this pronunciation is. That's what our tour guide in Israel called it. He said, "Ask Rabbi Google."
Yeah.
And so it says Nahum, Nayhm would be the pronunciation. So that's what we're going with. If I slip up and not say Nahum, I apologize. So the theme of the book of Nahum is wrath and consolation. And it's this prophecy about the wrath of God against the wicked city of Nineveh, an enemy of Israel. So we're pretty close together. We will have looked at Jonah. Jonah's the one we mostly associate with the book of with the city of Nineveh, but Nahum is also there. And he describes vividly how God's wrath is going to be poured out upon the city as punishment for its destructive and savage behavior. The prophecy is a form of consolation for Judah as God promises to deliver them from their oppressors. It offers hope to those who trust in God's ultimate justice and is a reminder that God's wrath and judgment will one day come to all those who oppose his kingdom. But it gives us that consolation. That's part of the theme, that those who choose to follow his righteous path will be redeemed.
It sounds like a letter that you would write to somebody that you're angry at and then not send.
Right.
That's what
Nahum sounds like. Yeah.
That's what as I was reading, I was like,
what did Abraham Lincoln call them? Hot letters or hot? Isn't that what he called them? Hot letters.
I don't remember.
Yeah. When he died, like they discovered hundreds of letters that he had written to people that were he just blasted them. But he would stick them in the drawer and he never mailed them. Yeah.
Just made him feel better.
Right.
And they mailed them out.
He got it.
They're like, "Ooh, whoops."
Well, there's a lot of truth. Well, hopefully by that time it didn't matter. He was dead. There's a lot of truth to that if somehow you can, because anger, frustration, whatever, it's almost like a festering sore, and if you don't deal with it, it just seems to get bigger and bigger, and eventually it's nasty, But if you can relieve the pressure, often it'll heal, it'll go away. It's not that big of a deal. And
so that was his outlet.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, and Google, y'all probably know this, but Gmail has a feature, and I think you have to enable it, but I'm not sure about this. But it's essentially drunk emails is what it is. And it reads your emails. And so if you're sending emails...
You assume that we know this.
No, because there's news. I mean, there have been articles about it. Not because y'all drink. It's because there are news articles.
So this is for emails?
Yes. And so...
Wouldn't people be much more likely to be sending drunk text?
Well, they don't have as much control over your text. But if you use Gmail, like, whether you like it or not, they're scanning your email. And so that artificial intelligence scans your email. And if you're saying things that are offensive or harsh, it will put a pause on that email, and it will come back and ask you later. And
that's funny.
I had read articles about this, and honest to God, and I don't drink, but I did send a kind of I'm not the right word. It was a nasty email. Like I was ticked off, and I typed it out, and I was using a Gmail account, and I clicked send. And then a few minutes later, I went to my inbox, and I had a notification. Did you send this email? We paused it and to give you an opportunity to see. That was essentially what it was. Yeah. So
did you resend it?
I did. Yeah, I couldn't resend it fast enough.
Not enough time had gone by.
I meant, they should have waited till the next morning to ask me. But on what it was, I would probably still been ticked off. So yeah, I think sometimes, and do y'all ever have this question? I have these questions. I believe in the divine inspiration of Scripture. But I wonder if some of these people ever expected what they wrote to be read by masses of people.
Mm.
You know, and if they did, would they have changed how they wrote it? You know, is that some of the beauty of it? Because now, from what I understand, and I was doing some reading about this just this morning, actually, in preparation for a sermon. From what I understand, prophets' words were always recorded, and they expected people to read them, at least in certain circles, contemporary circles, maybe not in years to come, but contemporary circles. They were often read aloud, you know, for the people. They often wrote them and read them aloud. But I've just always wondered if they thought, okay, for ages to come, people, because I can think about, now things that I have put in writing that I go, you know, how is this going to be received if somebody reads this 100 years from now? You know, I've thought about that. If they read this 200 years from now, what's going to be their perception of it? Is it going to be offensive? Is it going to be harsh? Are they going to go, I can't believe they said that? Or do y'all ever have those thoughts?
I don't write that much stuff.
Yeah.
But I have thought about that a lot, especially with things like Paul's letters to the churches. And I mean, how they get studied and scrutinized now. And obviously, he knew when he sent those letters that they would get circulated during his time from church to church. But I have wondered, like, did he realize, you know, what a standard he was going to set for people thousands of years later?
Yeah, he was speaking directly to that church
Right.
in that context. Now, the danger of it, I think, is that we can say, well, he was writing it to them. It means nothing to us. That's how far you can go with that. You know, if that's the path you take.
Yes, I have also seen the other side of that too, though, that he was writing things to a specific church
Mhm.
about their specific problem, and people use that as like
To
the,
address not that specific problem.
yes.
Mhm.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So today's reading would have been Nahum 1 through 11. And verse 7 specifically, that's kind of where I want to ask a question from, says, The Lord is good, a strong refuge when trouble comes. He is close to those who trust in him. Now, you can, when you read something that says he is this to those who do this, you can make the assumption fairly that he is not that to other people. Okay? So the question that I have is, why is the Lord close to some and far away from others?
I may be incorrect, but I tend to think that that's more our choice and on our part, because he is equally available to everyone. And if we choose not to be close to him, I think it's maybe in James where it says, those who draw near to me, you know, I'll be near to you. And I think he's making it clear that he is available to everyone, but we often just make the choice not to do the things that are going to keep us close to him.
Yeah, I agree. I think the thing is, it's like the Lord being good in this Lord being close is good in this context. But if you don't trust in the Lord and he's close to you, that means his wrath is coming and that's bad. So I don't think it's necessarily that he's far away and distant from some people, but it's your relationship with him that is really the differentiation there.
Yeah, and us being people of free will, you know, we believe that it's us who move, not God. I don't, and you know, I suspect y'all have had this experience where the proximity with people didn't change, but the closeness changed. I've seen this happen in the easiest place to recognize it is in marriages. You know, the proximity doesn't change. They're still in the same place, living in the same house, sleeping in the same bed. But the closeness, the relationship begins to dissolve. and most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time, it is one doing more of the dissolving. And I've had relationships where the proximity was there, friendships, but the closeness faded, you know. And sometimes from my perspective, you don't see it until it is drastic enough that it feels almost tense,
Mm.
and then you look back and you can't figure out, you can't put your finger on what caused this. And I see that happen I think I've had it happen in my relationship with God as well. I would get to a point where it was clear to me that the relationship wasn't what it needed to be. I wasn't as close as I needed to be. The intimacy with the Lord wasn't what it needed to be, but I couldn't take it back to a single instance that led to this. It was this drift, that took place. And sometimes I think when I read things like this, especially recently, it's been on my mind. I don't think proximity has to change as much as the inclination or attitude of the heart. I think people, for example, spiritually, I think people can still come to church and their relationship with God turn lukewarm. The proximity is the same physically to the things they were doing, but the attitude of the heart, here it uses specifically, he is close to those who trust him, the dependency on him. I think all of us have the danger to become self-sufficient. Have y'all had the same experience I was just describing, where proximity didn't change? You were still in, maybe the word is community, with friends or relatives even, but the relationship had diminished and it just wasn't as intimate or as close as it once used to be.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I can think of several instances of that.
And could you always go back and pinpoint what the turning point was?
No, but I think in most of those situations I could, well, maybe in one or two of those, but in most of those situations I could understand the reasons it had happened, not necessarily always pinpoint a time, but could see why things had drifted apart. And it was normally circumstantial stuff.
Yeah, I think when that drift happens, usually I'm aware of why it happens. I think I'd like to overthink things. So that tends to go hand in
Or you
hand with
think
it.
you're aware.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, because
yeah.
I can think of a couple of times where I knew it had happened and I couldn't figure out why, or I thought I had figured out why. I thought, if I say this, they're going to tell me this was the reason why. And then when I asked, it was something completely different that I was clueless about,
Right.
But yeah, anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah, at least I assume I know why, I guess. And then sometimes there's the repairing that can happen, and sometimes it's doesn't happen, and sometimes that's a relationship that just kind of fades away or stays at a different level than it was.
And I think the same is true. My experience in my relationship with God is that if it is not a priority and I'm not intentional about it, it will fade. I mean, like, it's got to take precedent almost over everything else that I do. Otherwise, it's going to fade. And the same is true, whether it's your marriage or with your children or with your friends. If they're not a priority, it will eventually fade. Any other pieces to this chapter you guys wanted to make sure we covered?
I was going to say, in context of what you're saying, that I was thinking about like my relationship with my kids, especially, but I have realized with them that even when things seem to fade in and out, you're closer, you're not as close, that consistency makes a really big difference. So I think sometimes we probably just have to be determined about it, despite our feelings, at the time. We have to be determined that that's an important relationship, and we're just going to keep doing
Right,
it.
and because it's easy for our feelings to lead the charge.
Yeah, it is.
And cause us not to do the things that we should be doing. It's easy. I think it's easy for all of us, not to follow through. Well, thank you for joining us today on this edition of One Single Story. Hope you'll be back tomorrow as we continue our conversation around the book of Nahum.